Hey everyone, the HPE Juniper Networks merger is on. You're watching TechStrong Gang. Hi everyone, it's Alan Schimmel for TechStrong Gang. Welcome to our Tuesday show. We've got some great stories to cover today. I mentioned the HPE Juniper merger. We're going to be talking a little bit about OpenTelemetry and the infinite workday. We've got an all-star panel, an epic panel to go over to talk about this today. Let me introduce you to them. As is our custom, our panel members who've been here before, we're not going to spend a lot of time introducing them. But real quickly, we've got Stephen Foskett, JP Morgethal, Mitchell Ashley, Bonnie Schneider. Let's call out the new guy. It's his first time on TechStrong Gang. He is Futurum COO, friend of ours, Dan O'Brien. Dan, welcome to the gang. It's great to have you on here, man.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. Hey, Dan, being it's your first time, just real quick, if you could give people a little bit of your background so they know where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've spent my whole career in tech, spent about a decade in semiconductors, semiconductor industry, about 5 years on Wall Street. Most recently spent about 7 years running the analyst relations organization at IBM and joined in January as Futurum Group president and COO.
Excellent. Hey, man, it's great to have you on, Dano. All right, let's jump into things. So, this wasn't a surprise to me. I knew they were going to somehow settle it. I just didn't know how. But Mike, HPE and Juniper are a go. What's the deal?
Yeah, and as these things go, this one's a little more peculiar than most. Apparently, there's some licensing of source code from the AI stuff that HPE built, and then they're going to get rid of a business unit that seems to be just basically hanging off the edges of HPE as it is. But Stephen, you track all this a little more closely than I do. What's your take?
Well, it's an interesting situation, as you said, because of all of those reasons. I mean, the big news, and I think the thing that we should really focus on, is that this is a big victory for HPE and poses a significant challenge to Cisco, finally. Cisco is the undisputed 800-pound gorilla of the networking space. They have fought hard whenever there has been a new networking market opportunity that has appeared. Lately, they've been really battling in the AI networking space, both in terms of networking for AI and using AI to manage networks. Now, one of the big competitors for the latter there, especially, is Juniper with their incredible Mist AI operations, AI ops software. And that is one of the angles that has been taken on by the DOJ here. So first off, what does this mean to HPE? Well, it means that HPE is going to be a credible competitor to Cisco at the high end of the market, which is good for the market. It's good for customers. It's certainly good for HPE. And frankly, it'll probably be good for Cisco long term as well, because, everybody benefits from strong and healthy competition. But what is the cost? Well, apart from, $14 billion, the cost is that HPE will have to offload a couple of elements in order to make the DOJ happy. One of those elements, as you mentioned, is the instant on Aruba networking platform, which, that's sort of an interesting thing. That is a small product for small businesses. It's an interesting one. It's a good one. It's one I've actually personally used. And frankly, I think that it will be a useful acquisition for some competitor in that space, though pretty much everybody in that space already has something going on there. But I think that it'll be scooped up pretty quickly. The big thing that's got my head scratching is the AI ops offload. So as you said, the agreement says that HPE has to offload, or not really, partially offload, enable other companies to use Mist's AI ops source code. Essentially, they're going to have an auction where the DOJ will allow up to 3 competitors that they are allowed to veto to bid on access to the Mist AI ops source code and access to some key engineers who developed it. Now, they won't actually take it over. They're going to allow two buyers that will be actually able to take that source code and solicit and hire those engineers, but they won't get the misname. And HPE will also be able to continue with this as well. So essentially what we're seeing here, if this goes the way that it might go, is that Juniper Mist AI Ops might become the de facto AI Ops software in networking if, let's say, a company like Cisco or Arista was to be the winning bidders on those licenses. But I guess the question is, why would they want it if it's not exclusive? I guess the only thing that they're really getting here, apart from the source code, is the access to those key engineers. But there again, they actually have to hire them. They actually have to attract them and bring them in. So it's a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah, it's definitely unusual. So, Stephen, I have a slightly different take. I don't think this was as much about making HP competitive with Cisco, as it, from the DOJ's point of view, as it is setting up a market where it's HPE and Cisco, and just HPE and Cisco. Who else? You mentioned Arista. I mean, I think between these two companies, they probably glom up 70 to 80% of the market. That's a two-company market in my mind.
No, because the leader in AI networking is a company you may have heard of called NVIDIA. And frankly, all of these companies leverage Broadcom's switching silicon. So I think there is a competitive market, and Arista is a lot more powerful than you might guess.
In terms of market share, where are they?
Distant. I guess it depends on the market, but yeah, they're a solid competitor, but they're not near Cisco.
Then the other thing is, though, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Wouldn't Cisco and Arista be an automatic veto, or are they allowed to get that source code? Because at the very least, if they got it, they would just slow HPE down like crazy.
Well, from the sound of it, well, this is another weird thing. It sounds like it has to be two. It can't be one buyer and it can't be three buyers. It has to be exactly two buyers, which makes me think they know which two those are. And I suggest that it's going to be Cisco and Arista.
To me, it's such an unnatural act, though. Why not just open source it and give it to a foundation?
In a way, they almost are open. So like they're going to, kind of pseudo open source it by getting these other folks in. And it's going to be like a fork, right? Where you're going to have, everybody starting from the same place, and then the buyers will all take it in their kind of unique
not
direction.
Everybody, just the three companies. If they open source it, that opens it to a whole new. Anyone can go in and try to do something.
First projects where there are two or three main contributors and not a lot else going on.
Maybe they don't want Chinese companies to take it either. So as part of
that, you know what? That very well may be the case, Mike, right?
And I think that's what the veto is all about, is to make sure that Huawei is not the company that takes it.
Or ByteDance. Just kidding. So when does this deal close?
And it's unclear. I don't think they actually have a hard date on it yet. Stephen, did you see a hard date?
I'm scratching my head. I don't know. I think it's going to close pretty quickly, though. My contacts with the folks at HPE, well, first, they are excited. They are happy. They are ready to go. And so I think the answer is as soon as humanly possible, because HPE wants to run with this.
Well, I'm sure they will have to announce it last week at Discover.
Let me ask this question, though. So I've been looking at this, we're going to kick Cisco's butt for the last 2 decades plus. And Juniper couldn't do it, and HPE couldn't do it. And what makes you think that Juniper plus HPE is going to make a fundamental difference? Stephen?
Well, I think that it will make a solid difference simply because of the fact that Juniper already has a really good products and really good customers. And the HPE will automatically get product and customer access like they've dreamed of for years. I think that there's so much synergy here. There's actually surprisingly little overlap considering how strong HPE is in sort of the broader picture of networking. When you look at the networking verticals where Juniper plays and the networking verticals where HPE plays, there really isn't as much overlap as you might think. And I think that is going to be hugely additive. I think HPE made a really good deal here.
Speaking of a good deal, I remember a time, Dan, you were on Wall Street, right? $14 billion. That's a big deal, man. $14 billion. In today's world, it's $14 billion. It's not like Masayoshi Son is building a new city in Arizona or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a big number anymore. I mean, you've seen, VMware, Google, in their acquisition for Wiz. I mean, the IBM Red Hat deal. I mean, there's been a lot of deals that have gone north of that. Nothing north of 100 yet. Maybe that's the ceiling, the kind of new ceiling at this point. But
maybe,
more of a mid-sized acquisition for tech these days.
But doesn't it? Look, I'm a child of my age, right? But when the .com bubble came on the scene, Juniper was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Seeing it go for a mere $14 billion seems like a bargain to me.
I think, doesn't it really also, go to the state of movement to the cloud as a whole in general, away from data center? I mean, infrastructure build out, where companies were spending a lot of that money on building. What did we lose after COVID? We lost people going to offices, and we lost build out of data centers, right, with the cloud. So you see a diminishing number of enterprise buyers for this technology at this point in time, and you have companies who are now owning that technology for themselves, that own the entire supply chain, that do build out data centers. So it's not like Juniper did anything wrong. I think the market changed on them, and their buyer is dissipating.
That's true. But look, we might be entering the biggest data center building boom, certainly since the .com bubble, but I'll venture to say even before the .com, even including the .com bubble. I mean, the amount of money pledged to these, whatever you want to call AI data centers, is staggering. Is there a place for Cisco, HP, and Juniper? The HP Juniper, I assume it's going to say HPE.
Cisco's already in there. Cisco's already in there as a partner for a lot of these. But, and like I said, the Amazon and the Googles, they have they're their own supplier, right? They own their supply chain for a lot of
on Broadcom Silicon, as Stephen mentioned. Certainly.
And hey, networking in the enterprise isn't going away. And that's HPE's strength, but also you get the wireless, you get the core networking out of Juniper. It's a great match. I think it bolsters up. I mean, HPE's acquired who? 3Com and, Meraki, an untold number of companies.
And don't think that, Juniper was asleep at the wheel here. They're not some lumbering giant who missed the phase. They are really competitive in the AI data center. And as I said at the top, Juniper's Mist AI Ops is probably the best AI Ops platform in the industry. And they have some of the greatest engineers. Juniper has really been running forward to try to move into new markets. And that's all HPE now. I think this is just incredible.
I think that's the bigger picture, Stephen. Take a step back. This is a good deal. It's made sense for a long time. It's great to see some of the roadblocks cleared, but the competition for these companies are the biggest companies in tech, and getting to a size and scale and a portfolio breadth that can be competitive with hyperscalers and NVIDIA. Certainly, I think as we've seen the AI data center build out, networking has in many ways become kind of a critical bottleneck, and bringing the compute side together with storage on the HP side, now with a more enhanced networking portfolio. Certainly if you look at what HPE was talking about last week at Discover, it was all about networking, AI, data center. Let's not forget HPE's acquisition of Cray in the high performance computing space. All of these things really do build a more compelling portfolio out. I think the big question for them is, how much of the AI processing and networking is going to happen, in the cloud versus not in the cloud. That's really kind of the big question for this combined entity going forward.
Yeah. I agree. Let me bring up another thing. Then it's something. I'll hark back to something I said right off to Stephen. I'm happy for HPE and Juniper, and Stephen, you're right. A good competitor is going to bring out the best in Cisco. Part of the DOJ's antitrust mission is to make sure we have markets that are open and allow for new competitors. with AI especially, with these kinds of deals and the kinds of money being invested, the capital requirements here, is this just a big boys game? Is this the new version of the gentlemen's clubs, where it's going to be impossible for up and comers to break in? Are we setting ourselves up for that?
I think you look at all the big markets where CapEx is really the name of the game. Semiconductor foundry, hyperscale data centers, they've all really gravitated to, one dominant player with a couple other strong competitors, right? At the level of spend that these things require, I think it is going to be some sort of oligopoly type market setup.
And that's actually the word, Dan, an oligarchy, kind of. Steve, I think you're on mute, Steven.
Sorry about that. I'll just point out right now, in terms of the AI networking market, it is NVIDIA that is the dominant player. Even in Ethernet, NVIDIA rules the AI interconnect. So they've got Ethernet and InfiniBand. Everybody is gunning for them. Cisco is, HPE is, Dell is. That's another company we haven't mentioned. Dell is really trying to sell into that AI data center market. I think there's an opportunity to have some real competition there, and there's huge amounts of money being invested there, not just on GPUs, but on networking hardware.
I think the proof in the pudding is going to be whether or not prices actually move, because so much of what we see among these cloud infrastructure providers is the prices don't move all that much. And it's a fine line between what Dan's calling an oligarchy and what other people might call
oligopoly.
Okay, so he's combining them.
I think there's another part of this networking, the real boom in networking in data centers is east-west traffic, GPU to GPU. And there's
that's where NVIDIA shines.
Yeah, that's where NVIDIA, there's a lot of interesting startups there. And Juniper, I believe it's their EX series. They've got some devices that are specialized in east-west. I'm not sure if they're that heavy into GPU traffic or not, but that could be an opening for them as well in the data center business.
Listen, in data center, NVIDIA has become so dominant that, the big problem I think we have in the market is that we really need one good alternative. And I think right now we've got a large number of kind of so-so alternatives. And, this deal and, similar deals to it, I think are really good for the market, because ultimately we need a good NVIDIA competitor. And there's probably not going to be a market where we end up with 10 good NVIDIA competitors. A market where we end up with 1 or 2 is probably the best that we can hope for.
And if you're interested in the technical aspects of this, I'll just put in a quick buzz. We've actually had all these companies present at Networking and AI Infrastructure Field Day. We've had, NVIDIA, HPE, Juniper, Arista, Broadcom, Dell. They've all given their pitch.
Cisco too, Steven.
Cisco. I'm sorry I missed it. It's so many. Yes, and if you look at those videos, you'll see the aspects of each of those products.
They're all available on techstrong.tv. All right, that's our plug right there. Hey, let's break on this block. We're going to come back and talk about OpenTelemetry consumption, energy consumption, and resource consumption. Someone's got to pay for it. You're watching TechStrong, gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Welcome back to the TechStrong gang. We are talking about energy use, and in the past of our EcoTech Insight segments, we've been talking about AI and green IT, but here's something we haven't really dug deep into, observability, and took a closer look at Dynatrace and what they're doing to improve the modification of energy consumption for OpenTelemetry, particularly based on a talk that they had at KubeCon in Europe, and you'll see a little bit of that, as well as a closer look at the analysis behind this new idea.
tools meant to monitor system efficiency are now being scrutinized for their own environmental cost. OpenTelemetry, widely used for observability, is emitting more than just data. It's consuming energy, memory, and compute at a scale that's prompting a second look. At KubeCon Europe, Dynatrace's Adriana Villella presented benchmarking results using Kepler, a tool that tracks energy output in Kubernetes pods. Her findings? Custom-built OpenTelemetry collectors used less memory and less power than standard versions. According to the CNCF, this type of observability framework has more than 500 active contributors. With adoption increasing, the focus is shifting to its own operational overhead. Framing performance around emissions resonates more with developers than cost metrics. Telling a team their app emits as much CO2 as 30 cars do in traffic, well, that gets more traction than citing cloud costs. Dynatrace is also leveraging KubeGreen, a time-based auto-scaling tool that lets Kubernetes pods sleep during off hours. They've integrated it into internal observability pipelines without relying on Prometheus to cut back on processing overhead and reduce overnight idle usage. As telemetry infrastructure becomes more embedded in critical systems, its own performance characteristics are attracting greater scrutiny. The focus is shifting from what observability tools deliver to how efficiently they operate.
So it's an exciting movement with Dynatrace and the efforts that they're doing. And they also shared some other information at KubeCon. And Mitch Ashley was actually there, and he's the person who told me all about this. So Mitch, I'd be curious to hear about your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I know the Dynatrace folks well. And Adriana Villella, who gave the presentation there, fantastic speaker as well. It's interesting. OpenTelemetry has become sort of the Swiss Army knife of not just monitoring, but metrics and measuring and collecting and then presenting that into whatever tool substrate that you want to use that in. And it can be anything from what are the effects of the user experience, what is the performance of servers. Now we're talking about energy consumption. So the OpenTelemetry open source environment has, I don't know what the total number of companies now, it's well over 100 that are contributing to that and are part of it. It's one of the most healthiest open source projects I think that we have. And they've started to really focus on the sustainability factor of it, because there's a great place to take both existing telemetry data, but also take in new sustainability telemetry data from tools like things like Kepler. They can integrate with OpenTelemetry or OTel and really give you a better picture. There's things that they've added into Kubernetes, for example, of turning down clusters during off period of hours that it may not already be configured for. You can just imagine the number of places that we could save money by turning things off or putting it into more of a standby mode. They're also working on some of the semantics that they have in their model, their data model of how they represent this information. So there's a lot of really good foundational work going on. And I think it's very much in line with where companies are looking to, how do I measure the results of what we're doing in sustainability? And can I demonstrate the actual value of those efforts? And OTel has a big role to play there.
Alan, is this too much of a good thing? And I'm laughing because I'm kind of like thinking back for the last decade or more, banging the drum about let's instrument more applications so we can do DevOps. Well, now we have.
Yeah.
Because it's
So there's two lessons there, Mike. I'm going to hit them both. But Mitch, to your point, OpenTelemetry is actually the second largest project in the CNCF, which has over 200 projects, right? It's behind only Kubernetes itself, right? That gives you an idea of how OpenTelemetry has cut in. But to me, OpenTelemetry is a poster child of the just because we can doesn't mean we should school of thought. Right? All of a sudden, we could measure everything. We could monitor everything. We could log everything, right? The Splunk school of thought. And no one really thought about well, what does that really entail from a cost point of view, right? Well, in Splunk, how much did you pay for storing all that data? That very quickly became a thing. But with OpenTelemetry, putting all these collectors all over, no one really thought about the energy consumptions and the cost behind it. We were so enamored with just being able to do it, right? So it reminds me of the old security adage, right, that I've learned a long time ago is people don't care, vendors don't care about security until their customers do. Vendors won't care about their OpenTelemetry consumption kind of graph until their customers do, and until someone says, oh my God, look how much I'm paying, someone shows me how much I'm paying for it and I do something about it. And I think from this report, an excellent video, Bonnie, from it, we're starting to see at least Dynatrace has gotten the religion, right? They realize there's an opportunity here. Kudos to Dynatrace of saying, hey, someone should be measuring this. Someone should be measuring what we're doing around energy consumption all along with our infrastructure. Because even though we're, rushing headlong into building these AI data centers with hundreds of billions of dollars, someone's got to pay this bill month in and month out for what you're using. That's the model. And
well, is it that the costs are the problem, Alan, or is it that we're not getting enough value from what we're getting for those costs, right? I mean, collecting all the data is great. Maybe we're not doing enough with it. I mean, I do feel like, the complexity of these, enterprise infrastructure estates has gotten to the point where, the only way really to optimize it is going to be through automation and AI, and, getting these data points really allows us to, take our APM data, our observability data, our cloud, carbon footprint data, our FinOps data, and really get to a point where we can kind of define for any given workload what is kind of the optimum mix of all these trade-offs we make across performance and cost and security.
I think it's kind of a double helix where, okay, this is what I get out of it. This is the good, right? That comes out of it. This is the cost. And someone's got to make that determination. Is the good worth the cost?
So I worked with a client. I developed their observability strategy guide for them. They're a platform company. And, this was really right before AI became mainstream, which oddly to say was 2023. So I'm writing this in 2023 and nobody's saying, hey, let's throw ChatGPT at this yet, right? So that's how early on in this game and how quickly this has really erupted, right? And the reason why that guide was important is because for the operations team, they were using Datadog, and they're turning on all these sensors. But the truth of the matter is, before you turn on a sensor, you really need to think about what are the important metrics and what do I. And the reality is that for a brand new platform, nobody knows exactly what the right metrics are. I'm using 22 different components, and I have distributed computing going on. I have networking. I have dynamic load balancing. I have Kubernetes spinning stuff up and eating up memory. I have physical memory, physical constraints. I have logical constraints, right? For most humans, this rapidly expands beyond their capability to comprehend. Now, we take that data, like you were saying, Dan, and we hand it to AI. AI, the first thing AI can do is kind of just give you a direction. Say, I'm looking at your platform, and I'm understanding the types of components that you're using, and here are the top 5 metrics that you probably want to look at initially for health, right? And then you start with these, and if you have an outage, you may want to expand to these. It'll do that for you. I think that's important, right? That's the thing that AI can do that humans aren't able to do today, is take 44 variables and consolidate it down into a operational direction, something that a human can actually look at and go, yep, I get this. Okay, I can comprehend this. And it's a way to minimize all of that energy waste, right? I'm not going to turn on all the sensors in the entire factory and see because you're going to get noise. Your signal to noise ratio is going to be unbearable, right? This is a way using humans and AI together that you can work as a coupling to say, what's the right things to look at? What do I turn on? And I do it from a bottom up versus a top down. And right now, I think a lot of people who are in operations approach observability from a top down perspective, trying to figure out, well, I've got all this data. Let me see what I can learn from it, what I can glean from it. And the truth of the matter is that's not the right approach to take. You don't have a baseline. So you don't know what you're gleaning. Even AI doesn't.
I'm actually working on a future of observability paper right now for Futurum. And one of the key factors that we don't often talk enough, kind of to your point too, JP, is it's because we can do something doesn't mean it's going to get used either, right? And I think the companies who are really good at not just, let's take this data and put it to use, or let's find a use for this data. The next step is, well, then let's find the people who would actually use it and will they use it? And since Dynatrace gave this talk, and that's one of the several companies that I've talked to in the last 30 days, getting updates on their strategies, is Dynatrace has done a really good job. I think is a good model for other observability companies of moving observability to a different place in the organization. They've done a great job of instrumenting Kubernetes and getting it to platform engineers and getting it to the IT ops team. They've done a great job of moving observability upstream into use by developers. So it both can be used during development, but also to better instrument their code. And we'll see. And they're also, by the way, I think doing a great job in the AI observability space too, which is new for them like it is for everybody. But we'll see how that develops. So to the degree, I think, to your point, Bonnie, that they can align with who in the organization that derives those value from that, and those metrics have resulted in bottom line dollars or KPIs or whatever it might be that has been achieved. I think that will help be that segment of observability identify that it's successful or not.
Does it not strike you as kind of odd that every time we seem to be talking about anything these days, it all comes back to storage and networking? And at the end of the day, a lot of the data that we are collecting is, as they say in Scotland, crap.
Well, it's all about storage, isn't it? It's all about storage. I just want to say first off that as somebody who's been in IT for my entire career, and that is a few decades now, one of the biggest challenges was the fact that most of the telemetry data, we didn't really call it that, but it is telemetry. Most of that was siloed, and thanks to OpenTelemetry, it's not. And I just, one of the reasons this project has been so successful is because it's right there in the name, OpenTelemetry. In fact, last year at Share, we had Broadcom talking about exporting mainframe data through OpenTelemetry to many of these same systems and really integrating that kind of data. Now, if you can have everything from the mainframe to the cloud, to on-prem, to the edge, all bringing data in, it is exciting, as JP was saying, to think about what AI can do. And not chatbots, as you said, AI, large language models or specialty models trained to do sort of find the needle in the haystack. But I do want to bring in one interesting factoid. Now, I was doing some research on this story ahead of this, and in the Futurum Intelligence platform, I looked up to see what the deployment of telemetry data is. And shockingly, it's interesting. There's a pattern here. It's just under 70% for public cloud, 66%, like 2/3 for on-prem. But it's only 38% for edge and only 10% for co-location. In other words, there's still an opportunity to bring more data and more applications online. And I think this shows that maybe we're drowning in data, maybe we're going to run out of storage, maybe we're going to run out of energy, but there's still more to do in the telemetry space.
There'll be a little something extra in your stocking this year. Thank you, Stephen, for that mention.
But let me put on my green hat for a second. Yes, we could talk about the value of the data versus the cost of the energy to produce it, store it, use it. And that's that's math. It's math, right? Kilowatt hours, however you want to do it. Bigger issue, Stephen, and I'm surprised you're not on your stool about this one, is Guys, we've got to do something in this world about the energy consumption. We can't just keep saying we're going to spend trillions of dollars building out AI data centers in cities and all of these things without fundamentally changing the equation on making this energy that we use for it renewable, recyclable, cleaner, better. Because just drilling more and spending and burning more fossil fuels so that we could collect more log data is probably, forget our little world that we live in here. We're all IT geeks. Our children and their children have to live in a planet where we need to do something about this. And how do we make that part of it, Stephen? I know you're our solar guru, right? Don't we need to really look at it from that angle?
I would love to see the real energy impact of telemetry data compared to literally everything else we're doing. And maybe it's true. Maybe telemetry is taking up a huge amount of resources. That was the subject of this Dynatrace presentation that kicked all this off from KubeCon, which, by the way, looks like is online now. So if you missed KubeCon, I think that you can find that on YouTube. I wasn't able to watch it yet, so I wasn't able to see their data. Did they talk about what the real impact is in terms of hard numbers?
Yeah, I believe so. And they showed the platform, and there's other additional lectures on YouTube that they've previously done and webinars. So there's a lot of data on those as well.
Go check them out.
Let's compare it to the number of TikTok videos that are completely mindless and brainless that are produced.
Agreed, right? Let's pick our fights where they make sense. Right? There is a lot of energy consumed on mindless. Yes. I'll leave it at that. All right. Anything else on this? Otherwise, we're going to take a break. Bonnie, great story, by the way. Thank you. All right. And as usual, you can get Bonnie's videos again on TechStrong.tv, on our OTT channel. Just look up TechStrong TV, and at echoinsights.com.
That's right.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. We're going to take a break here on the gang. We're coming back for our C block, and it's infinite workdays. I think we've all been there. You're watching TechStrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hello, we're back and we're talking about this new study that Microsoft put out called the Infinite Workday. It's a little ironic maybe that Microsoft's the author of this thing, but we'll jump into that in a minute. But the premise of this thing, let's start with JP, is that we're overwhelmed with too much information and we're being inundated with various messages all day and we don't have enough time to answer them all. And who knows, maybe AI is making that better or worse. We'll see how that comes out in a minute, I'm sure. But JP, what's your take here?
So I don't know where everybody else has been. I've been living this for 15, 20 years now. Sometimes it feels like PTSD. And I think that there's a cultural aspect to this as well, where there's a certain shaming that one feels if they don't respond, right? Am I letting a team down? Are people going to think that I'm lazy? Are people not going to take me seriously as a professional if I'm not there when they need me? And how do you professionally shut people down without worrying about how you're perceived, right? So there's a lot behind this. It's cultural. Now the question is, how do all these new AI assistants play? How are they going to participate? And what's going to be acceptable to everyone else? We've seen a lot of people sending the meme, where people are sending their note takers to meetings instead of themselves. And it's just one person speaking in a room full of note takers. Is that the future? Is that the right way to go? Meetings a waste of time. And if I have something important to say, I'll glean it and then set up some time to discuss it further. But this is a reality that we face, and I do think that it needs to be attacked, from a cultural perspective, not just a technological perspective.
Agreed. I mean, look, to me, I wish I had it with me, but I don't have my phone with me. I can't believe it. But, the advent of the cell phone was the ultimate tether. It tethered us all, and we all thought we were so smart. What independence this gives us. We can communicate with whoever we want, whatever we want, whenever we want. But really, it tethered us to our jobs for most of us, right? It tethered us to our jobs. We were in constant communication. Now, JP, like you, I've led this life also for 20, 25 plus years. In my case, I didn't think of it as work, right? My wife's watching a chick flick. No big deal. I'm going on Slack or whatever. I'll look at, I'm doing some work stuff. It's just what I do. But there was a crucial point during COVID when the work from home revolution really became mainstream. And I realized it because in talking to people didn't know there was an off button. There was an off button. And most people especially younger people, and I'm not, disparaging anyone, they have a hard time finding the off button. And everyone needs an off button, otherwise you get burned out. And
I thought about
real.
you this morning on my walk, Alan.
You thought about me?
I think about Alan all the time.
Thank you.
Well, usually when I'm walking, the first thing I do is I pick a podcast or YouTube to listen to while I'm walking. And I read something this weekend, so I decided to try it where just turn everything. It's your off time. Don't add anything. Just, do your walk, bike. So I was thinking, what do you do when you bike? Do you listen to stuff, or is that your escape time? Is that your off time?
I'm going to tell you. I'm glad you asked me. So there was a time where I used to listen to podcasts while I'm biking. I cut that out because it was taking away from my exercise, the endorphin stimulation. I listen to Apple Music Classic Rock Station. I will advertise it here. But I will tell you, my mind expands like I'm on microdosing or something while I'm bicycling, because I wind up spending a lot of time thinking about work stuff, but in a very non-structured, free-forming, creative way that works 100 times better than listening to some podcasts or checking my email or messages or Slacks or whatever. And so
there are other podcasts in the world that don't have anything to do with technology, right? You get that, right?
I heard they have that. There's a whole nother aspect to this, and that is, yes, it's the devices, it's also the software. How much are we inundated by? It isn't just email anymore. Yeah, that's an ungodly beast we still haven't tamed, but we've added to that. Every app on our device wants to send us notifications, and it's binary. All of them or nothing. And you total that up, and even with new things like Apple's done with summarizing notifications, I just get more summaries than it's still way too much stuff, and I don't know what those summaries mean. This would be a great place for better product design. And really understanding what are the notifications that matter to me. I don't really care about 99% of those. And what are the ways that I can fine tune those, or AI could fine tune that for me better. I think hopefully we can be smart about how we apply AI to this, but I don't want the software folks to get off for free on this. They're just as guilty as everybody owning 3 devices and watching all 3 screens and not talking to their family.
I think there's also the cultural aspect of it too that was mentioned earlier, that an email, it's okay, you can respond in due time, but when someone sends you a text, and it could be, a work colleague, you really do feel obligated. I better respond within due time because they can see you read it, they know that you have your phone with you at all times, so there's that cultural pressure as well.
Absolutely.
Dan O'Brien, what's your take on how this is going to play out in the age of AI? Because I've already noticed that it's a lot easier for PR people or whoever to create a message. And so there's more crap being created than ever. But the ability of the people and the cognitive load of the people who receive that has not increased. So it feels like there's an imbalance in the system.
There is. Yeah. I mean, a few thoughts for you, Mike. I mean, as we talk about I guess kind of the 9 to 5 becoming kind of the 5 to 9, 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. We do still need to sleep. But, I think, my big thought here is, I think we all know this from leading teams, but, when you ask people to do more, you also need to ask that question, what are we going to stop doing, right? And I think that's kind of the big challenge is we've added all of this, kind of extracurricular outside of kind of the, kind of set workday where we're proactively working, where we're doing a lot of reactive work kind of in the off hours. I think at some point you got to ask, what are we going to stop doing? And maybe that's, blowing up the construct of, I'm at my desk for 8 hours straight. We maybe need more flexibility, kind of during kind of that typical on time, to give people the balance that they want. But I really worry about the AI side of this, Mike. I mean, I feel like we're heading into a world where somebody uses AI to write a report, somebody uses AI to summarize that report, somebody uses AI to, synthesize the notes from the summary of that report, and nobody's actually writing it, nobody's actually reading anything anymore. We've just got our AI kind of flowing back and forth, and how do people actually consume information in a meaningful way where it sticks, it registers, it's got context, and we've actually got, kind of an agreement between the parties within these communications, what we're actually saying, what we're actually committing to.
I need that email with 5 bullet points and I'd be happy, right?
Well, maybe you don't use Slack. Just kidding, Mike. But
We've had that argument.
let me. I want to emphasize something though, and because I don't want us to overlook it, I want to make sure we hit on this. The Microsoft study called it a crisis engulfing modern employees, and that crisis is not that we're doing more work or that we are tethered like this. The crisis goes to burnout. Burnout is real. It's a recognized condition now by the World Health Organization. It's something my friend Gene Kim has explored a lot in the DevOps Enterprise summits and whatever he calls them now. I've interviewed several experts in it over the years. Burnout is real, and it's getting worse because I'm telling you, people don't know how to shut off. And Dan, I wish it was just 5 to 9. But I'll tell you the truth, I've been on with you past 9 o'clock at night. I've been on with you, Mitchell, Mike, past 9 o'clock at night. I know as a team leader, when stuff happens, I reach out, and I'm almost glad sometimes that people are on the West Coast because I pick up 3 hours, right? So it may be 11 or 12 my time, but it's still semi-okay to reach out to them. It's before 9. But, do we expect this as employers? Do we acquiesce to it as employees? And how do we recognize when we've crossed that line into burnout and it's detrimental to our health, and not only to our individual health, but to the functioning of our company?
And if I can jump in on this, some practical things that I've learned about this. Number one, I agree with all of what y'all are saying. It pains me as somebody who's worked from home and worked in an office to see people just sort of unequivocally saying working from home is better. Because better for who? Better for you, really? Are you sure it's better for you? If you can't proactively manage your time while working from home, you never leave work. I think that's the thing that really challenges some people. I think that whole commute and going into the office and being in a different place, I think that helps people organize their time. On the flip side, I think, as Dan was just saying, I think there's also a lot of value in those of us who worked from home effectively to changing the nature of that 9 to 5 workday. And frankly, I feel like the biggest thing that we have to do to avoid this crisis, because I agree it is a crisis. I see it with people that we work with internally at Futurum. I see it with my customers, and I see it with my friends. We have to proactively manage this ourselves, each of us individually. One of the easiest and most effective methods that I've been known to do is schedule things on my calendar for myself. I have, at the suggestion of my wife, an hour for lunch scheduled on my calendar every day. It's not like I don't know what time lunch is, but it helps to make sure that I've got some time to eat, and similarly, Dan asked me to work on a project. I scheduled blocks of time on my own calendar for myself to work on that project because I knew I needed to get it done. And I knew the only way to get it done was to the Microsoft report was to not have calls interrupting me every 30 minutes during that time that I'm trying to get something done. I need some time to focus. And those of us who've worked effectively from home realize as well that it's okay to schedule dog walking time. It's okay to schedule, time for a visit to the coffee shop or whatever. And it's okay to work into the night if that's what works for you. It just is a matter of being more proactive in owning and managing our own time and recognizing that if we don't have on time and off time, we will never have off time. So you have to have specific on time and specific off time, and you have to manage yourself as much as you're managing other people and your customers and coworkers.
So, Stephen, I like you, I've also set aside time. I have a 45-minute lunch break. But what I find, as soon as something comes up that I feel like I have to do or should be done, that is the first time that I sacrifice.
Oh, yeah. Me too. Totally.
So there's a little discipline, I think, that has to go with that.
Yeah, I'm not an expert at it, but I do think that it comes to, you have to manage yourself and you have to reflect on this. And I'll just say out there, if some of you who are finding challenges of this, maybe it would benefit you to go to a co-working space or something like that, because then you feel like you're kind of have on time and off time. At the very least, you have to have a home office with a door that you can close and not try to do this while your life is revolving around you. You have to have space.
Hey, I would just remind you of an old joke that says, when you're married and you have a full-time job and a couple of kids, what's the definition of quality time? It's the drive to and from work.
There was a time, I used to take the Long Island Railroad into New York, right? And you'd actually read a newspaper. Yeah, you remember those days, JP. Dan, you work from home. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard the term work-life balance, right? And I feel like it's probably not the right mental framework for that, because it really kind of puts the two at odds, where one is a trade-off versus the other. I've heard the phrase before called work-life harmony, and I think that's kind of what we're describing here. Is that it's a proactive stance. You've got to really take a personal responsibility on it yourself to draw those boundaries, right? I mean, me personally, I carry two phones. When I'm getting good quality family time, I can leave my business phone in the drawer, right? And I know I've got no interruptions. I tend to do my work, kind of only from my home office here, and don't let that bleed into the rest of the house. I prioritize sleep. I've got, kind of some limits as far as how late I'll go, and, back at it when I wake up in the morning. So those are at least some of the things that work for me. But to me, it's much more about that kind of work-life harmony, drawing some kind of clear boundaries, and, kind of that set of personal responsibility to make sure that you're taking care of your own wellness and mental health, and, making sure you're getting everything done on the job as well.
Agreed. I'm going to give you the last word on that one. Hey, I think it's time we get a little work-life harmony, because we've already done enough of our TechStrong Gang today. We're over time. What a great discussion panel today. Thank you all. Stephen, JP, Mitch, Mike, Bonnie, thank you. Dan, now you've done this once. We're expecting you on regularly, right?
All right. I'll be happy to be a recurring guest.
Thanks,
All
righty. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Again, hey, we've got a full day of TechStrong. Well, not a full day, but we've got another 3-4 hours of TechStrong TV coming at you immediately following the gang. You can watch this as well on demand on TechStrong TV or our TechStrong TV YouTube channel, or the OTT channel as well. Just search TechStrong TV. I think we've deconstructed the gang too, where you could actually just watch individual segments of the gang, not all three. So you've got no excuse. But until tomorrow, everyone, thanks for joining us. On behalf of our gang, have a great day. We're out of here.